over 40 men who had taken an oath, we won't eat or drink until he's dead. And I always thought that was, suicidal because he got away. But I found out later that under Jewish law, the high priest could void your oath. And so they could, he could do that, and he would do that for them to do that. So again, they're still plotting to kill him, which is just another little indication of their character. So question 3, and by the way, all of this is happening right now in Jerusalem. Festus has come right away down to Jerusalem. So what reply does Festus give to them?
He say, I'm on my way there also, and let those who accuse him.
Okay. So Paul's going to be kept at Caesarea. Festus says, I'm on my way there in a couple of days, in a few days. And that they could come and accuse him there. And Festus says, then I'll hear the case. Which again goes back to my overall impression of Festus was that he seems to be pretty fair-minded. He's trying to do what's best. So how long was Festus in Jerusalem?
8 to 10 days.
Yeah, 8 to 10 days. You say, well, that's not very specific, but really it is. It's pretty specific in general to say that he was there for a week and a half. That tells me that I'm dealing with an eyewitness here, a person who knows and has information that he can be that specific between 8 and 10 days. Mike?
But doesn't it also show that when inspiration is happening in the writing of the Bible, that the person who's writing it is part of the process?
Yes.
Did the Holy Spirit know how long he was in
Right.
there? Right. But it was giving the idea of he stayed a while longer and then took the rest of it and went up.
Right.
And
And the inspiration comes in not in necessarily in giving, well, he was there 186 hours, or something like that, but in saying he was there 8 to 10 days rather than saying after about 2 weeks or after a month, So there's an accuracy there, which is what inspiration is all about, make sure what's written down is true. But yeah, you still have Luke's gathering this information and putting it out, and from his sources, it was 8 to 10 days. Otto this morning asked me, he said, when was D. Bowman here last? Which is Russ's father. And I said, I think about 5 years ago. I'm not inspired. Because it was 12 years ago that he was here. And it seems like 5 to me. But I know he died 2 years ago. So yeah, that's where inspiration comes in, to make sure that information is correct. And then how much later did he sit in judgment on Paul's case? Yeah, the next day. The next day. And I assume the day after he arrived back. And we already know that it's a 2 to 3 day journey from Caesarea to Jerusalem. So he took that 2 days. When he got there, it was the next day. So if he got there in the morning, if he got there in the evening, whenever it was, the next day he's going to sit in judgment here. Again, a point for Festus that he's being diligent about that. What was the result of the efforts of the Jews this time?
I wrote down Ellen Boyd.
Okay, yeah. And you kind of picture this. Festus is sitting there on his judgment seat. The Jews are kind of surrounding Paul. I don't have a slide for you because I'm sure there's a photo of this. I'll have it next week. Bringing all of these serious charges against Paul, and Paul just standing there. And Luke doesn't list the charges. It just says that they brought these charges. And look at verse 7. When Paul appeared, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood around him, bringing many serious charges against him, which they could not prove. And so there's this, certainly not enough in the charges themselves to convince Festus of his immediate guilt. And listen, I'm sure there was paperwork from Felix and from Lysias is still there. I found no reason for imprisonment or death, and Felix has kept him there for 2 years. And so Paul now is going to be given an opportunity to speak and to make his defense, as is the normal case. And so that brings us to question 5. What were Paul's specific responses to these allegations?
That he did not sinned against either the church, either the Jews or the temple or Caesar.
Right. So it's a very brief, complete, but comprehensive statement in verse 8 there. He hadn't done anything against the law of the Jews. He hasn't done anything against the temple, which they're charged that he brought a Gentile into the temple. He says, there's no truth in that. And I haven't done anything against Caesar, which would be really the only reason Festus should be interested in this, is if there was something that he had actually done against Caesar. And a couple of interesting things here. First is Paul referred to the law of Moses, which had been the law of God, with the expression, how does he describe it here now?
Law of the Jews.
The law of the Jews. Why would you think he would say that?
Because Christ did away with
Yeah,
it.
so it's not the law of God anymore. It's their law, and it is their law. It's a civil law that they had, but it's no longer God's law. In fact, he even took Moses out of that. So it's just an expression of the law of the Jews, because now it's all it is a civil law that no longer has any spiritual authority. Second, and it's kind of interesting, I had noticed this is the first time Caesar's been specifically named in Paul's trials. That doesn't mean it hasn't happened, but here we read Caesar. Paul says, I haven't done anything against Caesar. So I assume that the Jews in their charges have brought up the name Caesar. Luke hasn't recorded it for us here. And so the Jews are trying to accuse Paul of something against the empire, or specifically the emperor. And Paul just simply denies it. No, I haven't done that.
Yeah, and I forgot to look it up. Which Caesar is this?
At the present time, that would be Nero. Nero's the one that only reason I know that is Nero's the one that called Felix back. Now, when we look at Agrippa was thick with Claudius. And so that's where he's got his kingship and everything was from Claudius earlier. Yes? Do you have another comment? Okay. So this is Nero. So when Paul says, I appeal to Caesar, he's appealing to Nero. All right. Question 6. What did Festus hope for in verse 9?
Paul would be willing to go back to Jerusalem.
And why?
His charges.
Why?
He win favor with the Jews.
Yes. And that only makes sense, or it makes more sense, let me put it that way, because it certainly makes sense politically for anybody when you are an occupying force in a nation not your own. But Felix was so bad. Felix had caused so many problems, and I think Felix was governor for 5 or 6 years, that this upheaval and unrest among the Jews is starting to foment, which is going to begin the war in 66, which just a few years away from now. And so Festus has been sent in there to try to calm that down, which is why, what does it say in verse 3 days after he arrived in the country, he goes from Caesarea to Jerusalem. I mean, he's really interested in calming this war that's going to happen. He doesn't know it's going to happen at the time, we do. And so now he's trying in a way to curry favor with them, again, to kind of ease the tension there. And listen, to make his job of governor that much easier, to please the crowd and those in charge of the crowd, which are the people right in front of him. And listen, remember back in verse 3, they'd already urgently asked him to do this. So he hopes that Paul will agree to stand before Festus in Jerusalem, which is what he says there. Are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and stand trial before me there on the charges? Tell me what the logic is for that. Where is he standing right now? In front of Festus.
Yeah, already.
So what's the point in changing the venue? just to make the Jews happy. There's no legal, logical reason why Festus thinks that he could hear a better case in Jerusalem, except for the fact that he's wanting to curry favor with the Jews. They've asked him to do that. And of course, we already know the reason the Jews want him down there is so they can assassinate him on the way. So the only logic behind it, if we can say logic, is the political hay that Festus can make by changing that. So question 6, what was Paul's? Okay, Daniel.
It seems like it is basically Festus's #1 job to prevent people from escalating things up to Caesar.
Yes.
So why, like, what is his reason for allowing him to kill Caesar when he could, and unless maybe he's just a really good man in some way, a just man? Because otherwise it seems like he could just say, nope, you're being tried before the Jews in Jerusalem. Because it's before him, but would the Sanhedrin also be there?
He can't because Paul's a Roman citizen.
Okay.
And Roman citizens had a right to be heard in trial. And Paul's going to bring that up in this thing. I'm standing here in Caesar's court. It's just like I'm in a federal court with you. And so that's my right. He doesn't have... Listen, Festus does have a thing he could do, which is what? Release him. He's done nothing. In fact, my predecessor found that he did nothing. That doesn't stop Roman governors from doing things. Pilate 3 times said, I find no fault in him. And he still had Jesus crucified. So, yes, Deb.
One of the things that I read is that because he was in front of the tribunal, that made it actually an official court hearing, which it wasn't before.
Yes.
An official
Yes.
Roman court hearing, so he had to address it.
Paul had an official hearing with Felix the first time. He has not had one since then. Every time Felix has met with him, it's been just private, one-on-one or one-on-two. So it has not been an official court situation. So Paul has had no right till now for 2 years to say anything legal or make any appeals legally. Now he's in that situation. So what was Paul's reply?
I'm already standing before Caesar's court.
Yeah. Paul knew that if he's going to receive justice, where's it going to happen?
Not for the Jews.
Not in front of the Jews. It's going to be before the Romans. I mean, that's the only place he's going to get any justice. And that is where he is right now. The seat of a judge appointed by Caesar, which is Festus, the procurator, that's one of their main tasks, was to sit in judgment. It's kind of like you got Moses, then you have the elders, and if you have a problem, you go to this minor thing. If you can't figure that out, then Moses hears. The far minority is the same system that we have. We have a Supreme Court, and then we have an appeals court, and we have federal courts, and right down to state courts, et cetera, et cetera. And so Paul had done nothing wrong to the Jews, and he claims that Festus knows that very well. I'm now standing for Caesar's court where I ought to be tried. I've not done any wrong to the Jews, as you yourself know very well. Man, that's courage. You know good and well, Festus, that I have not done anything against the Jews. There's no disputing of that fact. And so to return to Jerusalem would be, in essence, to be sent back to a lower court. Which again, even in the eyes of Rome, Jewish court would be a lower court than here. So instead, he demands that his right to appeal to a higher court be honored, and so he appeals to Caesar. This is the first time he's had an opportunity to do that in 2 years. I have another note here, but I'll ask you the question. What do you think Festus, what's in Festus' mind when Paul says that? John?
This has always been a curiosity to me, because at this point, he could have said, you know that I haven't done anything wrong, release me, let me go. But instead, he almost insists on being kept in custody.
Yeah.
Albeit protective custody,
Right.
but he insists on being kept in custody.
Right.
It's gonna be one of those wait until I see him to ask him kind of thing.
Oh, I'll help you out. You won't have to wait that long.
Oh, you've been talking to him. Huh?
Yeah, no. If you go back to Acts, I'll find it here. They're on to Jerusalem. Paul is arrested. Jesus appears to him. Where is that?
You mean he's talking about in 22, or when he happened?
Yeah, in chapter 22, when Paul appears, or the Lord appears to him.
The original time or the?
No, this time here.
Verse 21, 20 and 21.
No, that's no, that's not right.
The original time.
Oh, here it is, chapter 23. Verse 11, the following night the Lord stood near Paul. Remember when we talked about that? And Jesus was with Paul in his room right there. And he said, take courage, as you've testified about me in Jerusalem, so you shall also testify to me in Rome. So Paul already knows. And I think the Holy Spirit has given him the words. You know, appeal to Caesar. I need you to go to Rome. I need you to preach the gospel to Caesar. So that you can mark that one off your list, John, of questions you need to ask. Somebody else had Mike.
I thought the same thing when he said, as you yourself know well, because it seemed to me that was an external piece of information that he may have been given at the same time about, hey, Festus knows, but appeal
Right.
to Caesar. One last one, Festus was in a rock and hard spot in a lot of ways, because how many times do we read about the Jews with the rebellions and going off in the desert, taking all these men? He was put in charge of a hornet's nest.
Right.
Right? And here's the hornets coming, and
Right.
he's trying to placate them.
Right.
But he's seeing this guy doing nothing. He already knows that.
Right.
And so let him go. Good. Get him to Caesar.
Yeah. Well, and that's a possibility. You know, I'm glad. Listen, if there's anything that we've noticed so far about Roman political figures is pass the buck is their favorite game, and they're happy to pass it on. Pilate did it. He sent Jesus over to Herod. You're going to see Festus do the same thing here, and trying to pawn him off to a certain extent, or at least partially that way. But I can only imagine that Festus was not prepared for Paul to appeal to Caesar. And because what's Festus going to do now? Why did they have these lower courts? Why does the Roman government set up these lower courts?
So in all these cases don't have to go to Rome.
Yes. So Nero only hears the most important cases. So if you're sending an important case as a governor to Nero, what has to accompany the prisoner?
An army,
Well, no.
well, kind of.
A defense for the
The reason why I couldn't come up with the answer, why we need your input on this. This charge is beyond me. I don't know if you've ever had this happen before. It's only occasionally with me. You go to a bank and you make a deposit, and teller looks at that and says, "This is too much for me. I'm not authorized to do this amount." So then they have to go to the manager and have them see the check and put their little initial on there, and then it goes in. And basically what Festus is saying is this was too difficult for me, and so I'm sending him on to you. But what has to accompany that? The charge. The thing that needs to be decided. What does Festus have? He has nothing. He has nothing to send to Nero. Which is why he's going to bring in Agrippa later, because he wants somebody to give him something that he can write to Nero so he doesn't look like he's just been all night at a pig party. Okay? Now, yes.
I mean, he has nothing legitimate in terms of a charge against Paul, but he has a legitimate reason, which is that Paul has created, he's the source of all this strife. And so he doesn't know, what to charge him for, but he is causing all this strife. So it does make sense that you would send him to Caesar.
Right. Well, and what Nero would have said was, this is what Felix should have done, and this is what Festus should have done, which is what?
Let him go.
Should have released him. He's a Roman citizen. He hasn't done anything. No charges. Even Lysias, the guy that took him into protective custody, took him in protective custody not because he was a criminal, but to protect his life. Should have just released him. Somebody else had their hand up here. Yes.
Yeah, we have that right today to appeal our case.
Yes.
We find ourselves that way, we can
Right.
just bring that up the ladder, so to speak.
Right. Right. That's exactly right. So he can't sentence or convict Paul because that would offend Roman justice. He can't why hasn't Felix and Festus released Paul? Because of the Jews, which he's trying to keep. Somebody said a minute ago, he's between a rock and a hard place. I'm sure there was some conferencing going on. Listen, it's not written here, but when Paul said, I appeal to Caesar, Festus got together with his lawyers and stuff around here. Oh yeah, it does say that, doesn't it? That he conferred with his counsel. So I don't know what was said there, and I don't know how long it took. But the counsel said, that's his right. You're going to have to, I don't care that you don't have a charge. He has to go. And so he comes out to Caesar, you will go. It's a circus of Festus' own creation. And started off with Felix, yes.
So any Roman citizen could appeal to Caesar?
Yes. It was his right.
So I guess they would do that if they didn't like the judgment they got?
I don't know if it was that way or if it was, I don't know if it's like our system where you don't like the guilty, so I'm going to appeal to a higher court. And even then, they have to give cause, they have to give reason. This evidence wasn't allowed, or this was a mistake they made in my trial that came to this. They have to come up with a reason why it should be heard by a higher court. Paul's claim here is I should be heard by a higher court because I'm guilty of nothing. And no verdict has ever been given. He's never been charged by the Romans, and there's never been a decision made in his case, and so he wants to get to some place where someone will make a decision. Greg?
Wouldn't Festus be glad that Paul asked to go to Rome rather than be free? Because if he has no charges,
Right.
he has no valid charges, so his options are turning loose or go to a higher court.
Right.
And for him to ask to go to a higher court takes Festus off the requirement to turn him loose.
Right. And so that's going to please the Jews.
Yeah.
It's not going to be politically the best thing in Festus's mind, because he still has nothing to write to Nero. John?
Do you think Festus knew that the Jews were out to get him no matter
Oh, I'm
what?
sure.
So
Yeah.
maybe he didn't turn him loose because of that. He'd have had
Yeah.
to answer for that.
I think the 3 days that when he arrived in Caesarea from Rome, he's been briefed on everything that's going on. And there's this guy walking around the house, a Roman Jew who's just wandering around, and what's he about? And I'm sure that he knows all about that. That's my opinion, though.
So it could have been to protect a Roman citizen
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. Listen, when you start doing things, and you're licking your finger and seeing which way the winds are blowing, you're gonna have problems. Okay, so I had a little extra question here. Why has Paul justified this attitude? It's not, again, we've just mentioned that, a case where he's appealing because of a sentence issued in a lower court, because nothing has happened. This is the Roman citizen's right of provocation. It was at this time around for 500 years. So this is a long-standing right that Roman citizens had, a protection from summary punishment, execution, private or public, arrest or magistrates outside of Italy. So that's the only place where this can happen is if you're outside of the nation, the countryside of Italy. So go ahead, Kim.
So why are things going to escalate in Israel after this? To the point of the destruction of Israel.
Because Festus was unable to change the basics of the taxation and the occupation and all of the issues that are going on with corruption. The Jews are they're fed up with it. And they will just eventually rebel against it. By the way, I mentioned a few minutes ago that this is the first time Caesar is mentioned. He's going to be mentioned, or referred to, let me put it, 8 times in this chapter. 5 times in the Greek it's Kaiser, K-A-I-S-E-R, which is Caesar. 2 times the Greek word Sebastos, which means emperor. And then 1 time Kyrios, which you will read in the words His Majesty or Lord. My version has His Majesty in this text. So all of a sudden we are inundated with Caesar and the relationship with him there. So any other questions on question 6? Is there a question 7? What is it? The one that I just covered, why is Paul justified?
That was part of 7. You had 7 is, what was Paul's reply, and then why was he justified?
My numbers are all, there it is. What did Festus hope for in verse 9 is 6? So 7 is what was Paul's reply. Okay, and this would be 7B. Okay, I'll fix that on my notes. So we're on question 8 now, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what was Paul's attitude toward capital punishment?
He didn't mind, he just wanted it to be, fair. If there was no proof for the accusations, then no one should be able to put him to death. But
Okay.
he doesn't mind if that's the case.
Okay, Debbie?
Well, he exemplified how he didn't mind because how they put Stephen to
Okay.
death. So from his prior.
Well, yeah, I guess I hadn't even thought about that. He must have been for capital punishment when he was standing around watching Stephen be stoned.
And I'm not contradicting, however, there was no real proof either with Stephen.
Right. So basically Paul says he's not opposed to dying if he's guilty of a crime worthy of death. And yes, right?
Bringing a Gentile into the temple a capital crime?
Was what?
Bringing a Gentile
Yes.
into the temple?
Yes.
Is a capital?
Was a capital crime.
Wow.
And it was a capital crime under Jewish law, and the Romans granted it. And there were signs all around the temple. In fact, they've uncovered one. We've got a copy of one, original sign, that said if you're a Gentile and you are entering into this place, you have only yourself to blame for your ensuing death. So the Romans granted that. And Josephus even mentions it, that one of the Caesars in writing said, we gave you that right to do that. They didn't like it, but they did it. Yes, somebody else? So, and Romans 13 tells us that as well. I'm going to add that. Acts 7. That would be a good indication of that. But Paul says that the government doesn't bear the sword in vain. And that's what it's talking about, is capital punishment. So there's really no basis for denying the legitimacy of the death penalty as a deterrent against crime. Because it will have at least one positive: the guy that committed the crime won't do it again. The one that committed that. Which is, listen, that's the purpose of capital punishment. Capital punishment is the purpose, at least my understanding of it, it's not social reform. It's to give the person who did a capital crime what the penalty that they deserve and remove them. All right, so let's look at question 9, which is Agrippa and Bernice. I've got a little bit more about Bernice than Agrippa, but who was Agrippa?
He was a king, but I don't know.
Okay, he's king. Anybody know what his full title would be? That's not in here? Like the number of Agrippa? Yeah, Herod Agrippa II. Herod Agrippa II. And we've had that, I could have had that slide back up here again. He's the great grandson of Herod the Great. And Herod the Great is known for what?
Putting and killing the babies.
Killing the babies in Bethlehem. And his son, Herod the Great's son, was Herod Agrippa, or Herod Agrippa I. The reason Herod Agrippa I is Herod Agrippa I because we have Herod Agrippa II. Okay, we would never have Herod Agrippa. He wouldn't be known as one if we didn't have a two coming by him. Herod Agrippa I, what's he known for?
Killing James.
Acts chapter 12.
Killing James.
Yeah, he beheaded James and was about to try to do the same thing with Peter. Herod Agrippa I is the one who killed John the Baptist. Yes. So who was the Herod? Yes, I think that's right. And then he tried to kill. That doesn't make sense. I've got something wrong. Mike, can you bring up Acts 24 and put it up there? Because there's a slide on there that says the Herod family. I think it's all on there. Anyway, let me add the second part of this. Herod Agrippa II's sister was Drusilla. Drusilla, who was the wife of Felix. So, let me,
Wikipedia says.
there we go. Okay, so here's Herod the Great. You guys over here can see the same thing, right? So Herod Antipas was the one who beheaded Paul. And it's his, it's a different line, same going all back to Herod, but Herod Agrippa I is the one who killed James. So it was Herod Antipas that beheaded John the Baptist. So on my notes here are incorrect. So Herod had two sisters. He had Drusilla and Bernice, and then he had, and then obviously himself. Yes, Randy?
He's also the one that they said the voice of a God, and he didn't give glory to God and died at the end of
Yes.
chapter 12.
Yeah, that's in chapter 12. Yeah, he's the one that's eaten by worms. Yeah, and died. So let's talk about Bernice. Bernice? Yes.
Can we go back to Agrippa for a second?
Sure.
So I read that his father died when he was 17. Is that true? And then he had to wait
Yes.
for 8
Yeah,
years?
he and his sisters were all in Rome because every puppet king had their children educated in Rome. So he and Drusilla and Bernice were raised basically in Rome. But yeah, he was too young when all that happened. He was given a very minor kingdom in the northern part of the nation, and then Claudius is going to keep adding territory to him.
So was Claudius in charge for those 8 years until he became old
Yeah,
enough?
he was good friends with Claudius. Yes.
He was officially the king, though, after King.
I don't know. I don't know who was the king.
For those 8 years.
Yeah, I'm not sure. There'd just be minor people that were given those positions. So Bernice is the sister of Agrippa II and of Drusilla, and she is the oldest daughter of Agrippa II. And so while they were in Rome, as teenagers, she began to have an incestuous relationship with Agrippa II. Bernice did. Bernice was married 3 times before she was 22 years of age. The first one was she was given in marriage when she was 13, and that was to her uncle, Herod Chalcis, and she was married to him until he died. And after those marriages, she returned to her brother. Listen, this is a thing that incest was forbidden under Roman law, but at the same time allowed. I mean, it was just kind of, especially among the elite, people they weren't shocked by it. So when it became scandalous to the Jews, she then convinced Ptolemy, the king of Cilicia, which is where Paul is from, Ptolemy, Poleme, to marry her in order to hush up the incestuous scandal. And he agreed to marry her because she was so wealthy. And again, Josephus talks about this. Now here's the interesting thing to me, because they're so wicked. They're so absolutely, what's the word I'm looking for? It starts with a D. Depraved, thank you. That Bernice would not marry Ptolemy unless he was circumcised, because she's trying to please the Jews. And he agreed because of her great wealth. And so the weird parameters that they have in their life. But she soon left Ptolemy and returned back to the incestuous relationship that she has with Agrippa. And so there she is here. This is her and Agrippa, brother and sister, in a sexual relationship with each other at the same time. Now, as we move along with them, prior to the big war that's begin in 66, both Agrippa and Bernice tried to calm the people down, calm the unrest, and they failed. And so in 67 AD, Vespasian, who is going to become the next Caesar after Nero, and his 31-year-old son Titus, who is going to be the emperor after Vespasian, they arrive in Judea and they began to take Judea city by city in conquering them. Bernice is now 43 years old when that takes place, and she became Titus's mistress and was with him in the years leading up to the destruction of Jerusalem. So she was with him from that time all the way through 70 AD. And while they were not married, she acted like she was his wife. She demanded the same kind of respect as being Titus's wife. And when Titus realized that the Romans didn't like this relationship that he was having with Bernice, he sent her away. And everything that Josephus writes about indicates he loved her. Titus loved Bernice. She's 12 years older than him, but he loved her anyway, but not enough to make up for the political cost to him. And so guess where she went back to? She went back to Agrippa. And the amazing part of that is that this woman that we're looking about almost became the Empress of Rome. She was that close to being the Empress. Yes, Danny?
So at what point does the Herodian family are they no longer considered Jewish?
After 70 AD, pretty much. Yeah.
So everything before that, the Jews would see them as fellow Jews.
I mean, Israel is going to cease to exist, so there's no territory to give to them. And you don't really read about them after that. They have no position. All right, so we'll start with question 10 next week, which is for 9. Okay. I never cease to be shocked and amazed at how wicked and horrible the Herodian family is. They're just horrendous.
So the pace of the narrative seems to have slowed down now, which I assume Theophilus would be very interested in. This
Oh yeah,
section is
yeah.
a lot of detail.
Right. Well, and if this is actually his defense papers that Luke is writing for Paul, yeah, he would need to know.